Haribo. Welcome to Krishna Book Class 11. We're going to start with chapter 23 and see how far we get. Hare Krishna. But first, we'll actually start in kirtan.
April, sweet souls. Ooh. Yeah. Musician audio. So come into a comfortable seat. Wonderful to be with you all. All right, boom. So take a clearing breath, grounding, arriving. Inhale through your nose, fill up. Our opening prayer. Sit the breath in with humility, with sincerity, with receptivity. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Panchakopatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Shri Govindita ki Shri Shri Radha Govinda ki Shri Shri Panchatattva ki Mahabhakti Sangh and beyond ki Shastra Group Study ki Hari Bol.
Om Gyanadmirandhasya Gyananjanashlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatarupyascha Kripasindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Go Premanande Hare Go. So we read 2 chapters last week. We read the gopis offering prayers on hearing Krishna playing his flute. And then we heard about how they had been praying to Durga Devi, Mother Katyayani, form of the external energy, to have Krishna as their husband, and he reciprocated by appearing and playing a little trick on them, but actually just reciprocating with their bhakti to have a very intimate exchange. And so let's take some reflections on anything that stood out there. I can start us off. I really liked how the gopis were saying that we think that the river, which is the mother of all the reeds, must be very proud of that flute, which used to be a reed on the bank of the river, because that flute has achieved perfection. Its parents are very proud of him or her because Krishna is kissing him with his lips. They were transcendently jealous. What else stood out to you?
I really appreciated how so many of our Sangha members took the time to research to go to the 10th canto and cross-reference verses in a world where, women are taken advantage of a lot, and there's sexual misconduct and such, and abuse, and to then read the purport, understand more, and really feel the mood and the essence of why Krishna did that from a completely let's say no premeditated and no without any darkness, right? And how even as the majority of women in the group, we can all understand that. And that was several of you, Tanya, Allison, spoke about that in your Stacy, in your comments, and that the Shastra and the essence of it and the energy felt within the Shastra was able to shift that part in our material sense. That's like, no, right? And then for it to actually land and for us to be able to receive the teaching. I was really impressed by that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. We have several devotees like enthusiastically referencing the purports.
Yeah.
A lot of nectar to be had there. Stacy has her hand up.
So just like what Kishori said, I actually you can go on YouTube and you have the Krishna book. I can go on there, find Srimad Bhagavatam. But I was like, you know what? I want to read it. And I have the whole set in my other room. So I'm like, I want to get it. I want to read it. I want to read those chapters. I want to see what it says. Because a lot of people had me going too last week. Tanya was like, I don't understand it. I don't get. And so but I like that, all of the questioning, all of the trying to make it fit in our heads, and all of us have something that happens with, and that's for me. That's how I learn, just by doing it and looking and researching, and so like Kishori said, there were so many of us who kind of did that, which was so great because I was able to sort of see read everybody's what they wrote and kind of understand. What I got out of it was it just felt like, let me just show you how nectarian this can be, how much nectar, how rich, how rich everything could be, down to his flute that they were jealous of. What did that flute do in a past life that Krishna gets to have, well, the flute gets to have Krishna's lips on the flute, like you said when we started. So it went down to the little mini, everything was covered. Everything was covered in devotion and love of Krishna. That's how.
Yeah, we have a wealth. We have a wealth of realization and information from our previous acharyas in the Shastra. Like for example, as far as I recall, actually, Krishna has 3 different flutes. He has a short, medium, and a long, and they have different names, and they have different. I can only assume they have different musical qualities as well. There's something to be said for hearing and chanting and just like receiving it, and there's also something to be said for, as my Guru Maharaj puts it, the symptom of a really successful session of hearing and chanting is you come away with more questions, right? Because then it's actually like you can meditate on that, you can pray on it, you can take it to the Shastra, you can take it to other devotees, you can just like, maybe you don't get an answer, maybe often you do, but those reflections, those questions, that exploration, that thirst for detail, that taking shelter of all those different authentic sources, it just creates more nectar. It ultimately creates more appreciation for Krishna. It's like, wow. And yeah, and sometimes like the Lila or the philosophy bounces off one part or another of our preconceptions, our conditioning, our material mind, our intelligence, whatever it may be. And it's like totally important and relevant to note that and address it, like Arjuna does in the Bhagavad Gita. I don't see how this makes any sense, Krishna. Help me understand. And 9 times out of 10, there are questions or doubts or like subtopics that are actually not completely. You didn't make it up. It's not just you. It's like other people have talked about it. The acharyas may have directly addressed it. In fact, this point of how Krishna is apparently transgressing like social lines between men and women. This is something that Shukadeva Goswami himself and Maharaj Parikshit talk about in a few chapters. It'll come up directly in their conversation. This is like very, very central. Like with the Madhurya Lila, the rasa the gopis have with Krishna, it's quite natural that there's like question marks around it. So thank you. Eileen.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So I apologize for not writing in the chat. It's been a couple weeks here. But I've been, it's interesting. One of my teachers and I, we talk a lot about similarities between lots of faiths and religions rather than the differences. And like, I come from a Catholic, background, and it's what brought me to Krishna consciousness, right? It really is. And so one of the concepts that was like in my head, because I have like all my Bible study that comes in and like all of a sudden like something will click and I'm like, oh, wait, I learned that like back in the day. So this concept of like Krishna and the gopis wanting Krishna to be their husband, it sounds kind of crazy, right? But then I was like, okay, in the Bible and in the Old Testament and the New Testament, God, or particularly Jesus in the New Testament, is referred to as a bridegroom. And the reason that they call him the bridegroom is because they call like the church or the people of the church the bride, and it conveys like the imagery of this intimate, loving relationship with God, similar to a bond between a husband and wife. So it just kind of says, hey, it's emphasizing the desire for a close and personal connection with God, and the sacredness of a covenant that a man and a wife can make together is a covenant of love and commitment. And that's really what Krishna's like looking for from us. And, there's this like rejoicing over a bride, and it shows like God really wants these beautiful experiences in his relationships with us. So I just thought it was kind of cool that like the Jewish faith has this kind of in their history. Catholicism and Christianity has this. And I love that it kind of like, again, kind of brings it all together, that it just makes it even more solid for me to kind of say like, this is a theme that's consistent amongst lots of different paths.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. In the Catholic tradition, the fully fleshed out understanding of Madhurya Rasa is not mainstream. It's not even mainstream in Vaishnavism, to be honest. It's like in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, because of Lord Chaitanya, it's become more unearthed. Like we can see that it's in the Bhagavatam. Other branches of Vaishnavism don't necessarily deal with it as much. But we can see like in certain saints like Teresa of Avila, she 100% was demonstrating symptoms of ecstatic love for God, and she was 100% in demonstrating symptoms of Madhurya Rasa, that she had that conception. And she was a renounced cloistered nun. She didn't, she was not mainstream. She was living with other nuns somewhere, and she had that deep internal achievement. So it's a capacity of the soul. It's a variety of love the soul can have with God. And yeah, it's very appropriate to bring that up. Like we're commemorating, honoring the passing of Pope Francis.
Yeah. And even like nuns will wear a ring symbolic of being married or wed to God. Yeah. And so I just, again, this imagery of like this idea of like the gopis wouldn't be married to Krishna and Krishna marrying the gopis, and like having this, it takes away, having that kind of, I guess, that perspective takes away that other piece of what we put together as like a material connection. And I just thought it was really cool.
Me too. Yeah, thank you. Srila Prabhupada had a conversation once with somebody. I think he may have been a professor or something. I don't quite recall. And this person was commenting that, your Krishna, he's not such a morally upstanding person. He dances with other people's wives and different things, and he's going out there and having these dances and so forth. It's all very, it's not so appropriate. And so Srila Prabhupada said, "So you're married?" And this gentleman said, "Yes." "So you're thinking your wife is your wife?" "Yes." "Yes, I do." And Prabhupada says, "So okay, so the problem here is not that Krishna is inappropriate. The problem is that you're inappropriate. You think that somebody who belongs to Krishna is yours. That's the problem. Nobody belongs to you. Everyone belongs to Krishna. That's reality. And the fact that we're just kind of divvying up, this one is mine, that one is yours, that's our material disease. And you can do it in a more polished way, or you can do it in a more animalistic way, but it's still illusion, because everybody belongs to Krishna." So Prabhupada was pushing back against that there's a paradigm shift required, that actually everybody is Krishna's energy. He's playing with his parts and parcels, like a child can play with their own reflection or with their own hair or something. There's no inappropriateness there at all, but it's in the material conception. Thank you.
Shami, you said last class that we may not be able to prove the presence of God, but we can prove love of God by those that love him.
Yeah.
And it's that, like what I know you were just speaking about a nun's love for Krishna,
Yeah.
or the gopis' love for Krishna, or our love for Krishna.
You can see it in the humility of the Pope, who just left his body. I saw a nice comic about that. There was St. Peter in the pearly gates, and there's like a trumpeting angels and a choir, and you have this little quiet man entering the service entrance next door. Quiet. And I was like thinking, yeah, that's what it's all about. Bhakti is service. So the qualities that develop in a human being through the practice of bhakti are actually observable. And they can hint at some of the realizations that may be underneath. And for more, we have to take shelter of the writings of like Rupa Goswami and Shastra, and hearing about these, like the gopis of Vrindavan. So, Jai. Any more reflections before we jump into chapter 23? Tanya?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, when I first started listening to Wisdom of the Sages, I don't know, 5 years ago, I heard Raghunath talk about this story. And sometime around that time, I got my volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and I started reading. And in the beginning, like first canto, somewhere in the beginning, Prabhupada mentioned that you need to read this in order before you get to the 10th canto. So I've kind of been waiting for 5 years to figure this story out. Honest to God, I've like just, and I remember I even said to Kishori when we talked about reading the Krishna book, I'm like, yeah, but I haven't gotten through canto 9 yet. Like, I have to read it in order to get there. That was kind of the impetus for me to start reading not just that story, but I wanted to do it the way that Srila Prabhupada wanted it to be, or at least it initially wanted it to be done. So I was trying to read it in order so that by the time I got to this text, I wouldn't be wrestling with my material mind. And even when you read it to us last week, I was still wrestling with my material mind because, I'm a victim of sexual abuse, and I didn't understand that concept. you know,
Yeah.
of having them come up to walk up to him. And I had to go into the Srimad Bhagavatam to really read through it and understand it. And, you know, I know this is going to sound silly, but like all these gopis together, like I feel like in our material world, they would have been fighting over, no, I'm going to be the one. No, I'm going to be the one. Like they would have been, you know, cordial to take turns to present themselves as his potential wife. In my material mind, I was just really wrestling with it. And I just wanted to be honest about that. And that's why I did the research. And somehow, I don't know what it is, but somehow, and I don't remember it being in the Krishna book this way, but Krishna went to that watering hole with companions.
Mm-hmm.
But the purport said those companions were babies, little naked cherub babies.
Even Krishna is pretty young. He's definitely prepubescent, but they're like 3 years old.
Yeah, but somehow that piece is what made it hit home for me, because those little innocent babies don't know the difference between the boys and the girls' bodies, and that sweet innocence is what really made it put me in the right mood to understand it.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I did. But I just wanted to be clear, and I was almost hesitant to kind of admit that I was a little distrusting of this verse. I didn't understand it, but now I feel good about it.
Well, that's called taking shelter. Thank you for revealing your heart. That's called taking shelter of Shastra. Is that like, I don't know, and I'm ready to be enlightened. And your other point, like, it wasn't silly at all. It was actually spot on. In the material world, there would be competition. That's a symptom of limited resources.
Right.
Krishna being what he is, the spiritual energy being what it is, these devotees at the pure stage, they're not competing with each other. We see the residents of Vrindavan, although they miss Krishna, like the gopis miss him when he's out with his friends, and his parents miss him then too, and then his friends like miss him when he has to go home. But there's no jealousy or malice, and everyone appreciates everybody's service and glorifies it even, right? Like the gopis were glorifying the flute. When we hear that, they feel like jealous. It's not the jealousy of the material energy where it's like you feel bad. It's like an increased rasa of, wow, look how amazing this flute, this reed must be. Like, what has it even done to have this privilege? It's just actually just another form of appreciation. So there was no fighting over Krishna. That never happens. That's conspicuous by its absence. In fact, it's described that in many places, in many ways, that Srimati Radharani, who's the greatest devotee, her personality is such that she was always thinking how to engage everyone else in Krishna's service and how to facilitate them to have some time with him and how to bring his attention to them. That, hey, he's a great devotee, she's a great devotee, Krishna, you please give them your mercy. So she's always, that's her mood. The perfection of bhakti manifests in that way. So thanks for those reflections, and thanks for taking shelter of the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada and the Shastra itself and other acharyas have pointed out we have to read Bhagavatam sequentially for this reason, and because it's very purifying. And Srila Prabhupada, as I mentioned at the beginning of the Krishna book readings, he paused the Bhagavatam translations around Canto 3 or something. I think it was Canto 3 to give us Canto 10 in the form of the Krishna book, because it's so important to hear about Krishna's personal pastimes. And you notice the way he presents it is it's couched in Bhagavad Gita philosophy. It's couched in real world examples. It's coming with his own realization so that medicine can act, but it's also properly protected. It's a very special book in that way, that Prabhupada, he went out of his way to give us these pastimes and give it in a way that it's safer. It's actually like, it's safe and it's okay. It's okay to read. We distribute Krishna book on the street, and we give it to completely new persons, and that was Prabhupada's desire. And it's, it's a favorite of so many devotees. So thanks for that reflection. Let's get into it, shall we?
Yes.
Krishna 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 Hey. Krishna 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 Hey. Krishna 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 Rakshamam. Krishna 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 Pahimam. Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rama Raghava Rakshamam. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava Pahimam. Krishna Book Ki Jai, chapter 23, delivering the wives of the Brahmanas who perform sacrifices. The morning passed, and the cowherd boys were very hungry because they had not eaten breakfast. They immediately approached Krishna and Balaram and said, "Dear Krishna and Balaram, you are both all-powerful. You can kill many, many demons. But today we are much afflicted with hunger, and this is disturbing us. Please arrange for something that will mitigate our hunger." Requested in this way by their friends, Lord Krishna and Balaram arranged to show compassion to certain wives of Brahmanas who were performing sacrifices. These wives were great devotees of the Lord, and Krishna took this opportunity to bless them. He said, "My dear friends, please go to the house of the Brahmanas nearby. They are now engaged in performing the Vedic sacrifice known as Angirasa, for they desire elevation to the heavenly planets. All of you please go to them." Then Lord Krishna warned his friends, "These Brahmanas are not Vaishnavas. They cannot even chant our names, Krishna and Balaram. They are very busy in chanting the Vedic hymns, although the purpose of Vedic knowledge is to find me. But because they are not attracted by the names of Krishna and Balaram, you had better not ask them for anything in my name. Better ask for some charity in the name of Balaram." Charity is generally given to high-class Brahmanas, but Krishna and Balarama did not appear in a Brahmana family. Balaram was known as the son of Vasudeva, a Kshatriya. And Krishna was known in Vrindavan as the son of Nanda Maharaj, who was a Vaishya. Neither belonged to the Brahmana community. Therefore, Krishna considered that the Brahmanas engaged in performing sacrifices might not be induced to give charity to a Kshatriya and Vaishya. But at least if you utter the name of Balaram, they may prefer to give in charity to a Kshatriya rather than to me, because I am only a Vaishya. Being thus ordered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the boys went to the Brahmanas and began to ask for some charity. They approached them with folded hands and fell down on the ground to offer respect. "O earthly gods, kindly hear us, who are ordered by Lord Krishna and Balaram. We hope you know them both very well, and we wish you all good fortune." Krishna and Balaram are tending cows nearby, and we have accompanied them. We have come to ask for some food from you. You are all Brahmanas and knowers of religious principles, and if you think that you should give us charity, then give us some food, and we shall all eat along with Krishna and Balaram. You are the most respectable Brahmanas within the human society, and you are expected to know all the principles of religious procedure. Although the boys were village boys and were not expected to be learned in all the Vedic principles of religious ritual, they hinted that, because of their association with Krishna and Balaram, they knew all those principles. By addressing the Brahmanas as, quote, knowers of all religious principles, the boys expressed the point of view that when the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna and Balaram, were asking for food, the Brahmanas should immediately deliver some without hesitation because, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, one should perform yajna, sacrifices, only for the satisfaction of Vishnu. The boys continued, "Lord Vishnu, as Krishna and Balaram, is standing waiting, and you should immediately deliver whatever food you have in your stock." They also explained to the Brahmanas when food is to be accepted and when it is not to be accepted. Generally, the Vaishnavas or pure devotees of the Lord do not take part in ordinary sacrificial performances. But they know very well the ceremonials called Diksha, Pashusamstha, and Sautramani. One is permitted to take food after the procedure of Diksha and before the animal sacrifice ceremony and the Sautramani, or ceremony in which liquors are also offered. The boy said, "We can take your food at the present stage of your ceremony, for now it will not be prohibited. So you can deliver us the food." I don't think Prabhupada's going to talk about this here, so I'll just mention. He talks about it in other places. In previous ages, there were a variety of yajnas, of sacrifices performed, and in previous ages, ritualistic fire sacrifice was possible to be performed perfectly because of perfect ingredients and brahmanas who were completely trained to catch every syllable being properly pronounced, which it has to be for that particular kind of yajna to work. So one of the actual sacrifices was an animal sacrifice, where you would actually present an animal, and with mantras, an old animal would be offered into the fire, and it would come out young and new, and that was the proof that it had worked. And because of that, and because it's not possible to actually pronounce the mantras properly in the age of Kali, it's clearly stated in Shastra, that is not a valid form of yajna anymore. Those kinds of yajnas are not possible. because we can't pronounce the mantras perfectly. There's so many things wrong with time, place, circumstance, training. The ghee that's used has to be very specific, everything. So it's not possible. Now it's a Sankirtan Yajna chanting the Lord's names, non-sectarian chanting. So that's what's meant by this animal sacrifice. This is from the previous age where that was still viable. So continuing, although the companions of Lord Krishna and Balaram were simple cowherd boys, they were in a position to dictate even to the high-class brahmanas engaged in the Vedic rituals of sacrifice. But these smarta brahmanas, who were simply sacrificial-minded, could not understand the dictation of the transcendental devotees of the Lord. Smarta means very oriented toward the smriti, very oriented toward the rules and regulations, orthodox, highly orthodox, conservative. They could not even appreciate the begging of the Supreme Lord, Krishna and Balaram. Although they heard all the arguments on behalf of Krishna and Balaram, they did not care for them, and they refused to speak to the boys. Despite being highly elevated in the knowledge of Vedic sacrificial rites, all such non-devotee brahmanas, although they think of themselves as very highly elevated, are ignorant, foolish persons. All their activities are childish because they do not know the purpose of the Vedas, as it is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, to understand Krishna. In spite of their advancement in Vedic knowledge and rituals, they do not understand Krishna. Therefore, their knowledge of the Vedas is useless. Lord Chaitanya therefore gave his valuable opinion that, although a person may not be born in a Brahmana family, if they know Krishna or the science of Krishna consciousness, they are more than a Brahmana, and they are quite fit to become a spiritual master. Yes, that's directly in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Kipra vipra kipra nyasi shudra kenanoi jai Krishna tattva veta she guru hai. Whether one is Vipra, a Brahmana, a sannyasi, or a Shudra, if they know the science of Krishna, they're fit to perform the service of Guru. So it's actually a very interesting thing because these Brahmins are the head of the social order. They're very refined. They're in the mode of goodness. They know the Vedas, they know the Shastra, but these particular Brahmins are not Vaishnavas. They don't recognize that the personal source is present right before them, the object of all of their sacrifices. So it's a really interesting thing where like these simple boys are going and actually asking for this offering for Krishna, and they didn't even acknowledge their presence, right? If you ever like have someone look right through you, like they don't even acknowledge that you're there, it almost hurts more than anything, right? You know, where you try to catch someone's attention, they pretend you don't exist. That's what the Brahmins did. Painful. And let's see where it goes. There are various details to be observed in the performance of sacrifices. They are known as desha, place, kala, time, pratagdravya, the different detailed paraphernalia, mantra, hymns, tantra, scriptural evidences, agni, fire, rutvik, learned performers of sacrifices, devata, the demigods, yajamana, the performer of the sacrifices, kratu, the sacrifice itself, and dharma, the procedures. All these are for satisfying Krishna. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that he is the actual enjoyer of all sacrifices because he is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Supreme Absolute Truth, beyond the conception or speculation of the material senses. He is present just like an ordinary human boy, but for persons who identify themselves with the body, it is very difficult to understand him. The Brahmanas were very much interested in the comforts of the material body, and an elevation to the higher planetary residence is called Svargavasa. They were therefore completely unable to understand the position of Krishna. So we can see here, their attachments were getting in the way. Because of their attachment to Svarga, to heavenly rebirth, and the benefits thereof, the material benefits, they had missed the point of Shastra. So when Krishna appeared, they couldn't appreciate him because they didn't appreciate Krishna in their practice. They appreciated their own sense gratification despite their refinement. It's actually really interesting. When the boys saw that the Brahmanas would not reply to them, even with a simple yes or no, they became very much disappointed. They then returned to Lord Krishna and Balaram and explained everything that had happened. After hearing their statements, the Supreme Personality of Godhead smiled. He told them that they should not be sorry for being refused by the Brahmanas because that is the way of begging. He convinced them that one who is engaged in collecting or begging should not think that he will be successful everywhere. He may be unsuccessful in some places, but that should not be the cause for disappointment. Yeah, what he actually literally says too is that if everyone knew how hard it was to beg, everyone would always give. And if everyone knew how hard it was to give, nobody would ever beg. So it's kind of a tough situation one way or the other. And Krishna is detached. Lord Krishna then asked all the boys to go again, but this time to the wives of those brahmanas engaged in sacrifices. He also informed them that these wives were great devotees. They are always absorbed in thinking of us. Go there and ask for some food in my name and the name of Balaram, and I am sure they will deliver you as much food as you desire. Carrying out Krishna's order, the boys immediately went to the wives of the brahmanas. They found the wives sitting inside the brahmanas' house. They were very beautifully decorated with ornaments. After offering them all respectful obeisances, the boys said, "Dear mothers, please accept our humble obeisances and hear our statement. May we inform you that Lord Krishna and Balaram are nearby. They have come here with the cows, and you may also know that we have come here under their instructions. All of us are very hungry. Therefore, we have come to you for some food. Please give us something to eat for Krishna, Balaram, and ourselves." Immediately upon hearing this, the wives of the brahmanas became anxious for Krishna and Balaram. Their reactions were spontaneous. They did not have to be convinced of the importance of Krishna and Balaram. Immediately upon hearing their names, they became very eager to see them. Being advanced by thinking of Krishna constantly, they were performing the greatest form of mystic meditation. All the wives then became very busily engaged in filling up different pots with nice food. Due to the performance of the sacrifice, the various foods were all very palatable. After collecting a feast, they prepared to go to Krishna, their most beloved object, exactly in the way rivers flow to the sea. For a long time, the wives had been eager to see Krishna. However, when they were preparing to leave home to go to see him, their husbands, fathers, sons, and relatives asked them not to go. But the wives did not comply. When a devotee is called by the attraction of Krishna, he does not care for bodily ties. The women entered the forest of Vrindavan on the bank of the Yamuna, which was verdant with vegetation and newly grown vines and flowers. Within that forest, they saw Krishna and Balaram engaged in tending the cows along with their very affectionate boyfriends. The brahmanas' wives saw Krishna with a blackish complexion, wearing a garment that glittered like gold. He wore a nice garland of forest flowers and a peacock feather on his head. He was also painted with the minerals found in Vrindavan, and he looked exactly like a dancing actor on a theatrical stage. They saw him resting one hand on the shoulder of his friend, and in his other hand he was holding a lotus flower. He was playing with it with his finger, the Bhagavatam says, rolling the stem back and forth. The acharyas describe he's holding the stem, the flower, and going like this, and he was saying, "I have your heart in my hand," in just the same way. Just like I have this flower, I have your heart in my hand, because he knew they're his devotees. His ears were decorated with lilies. He wore marks of tilaka, and he was smiling charmingly. With their very eyes, the wives of the Brahmins saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, of whom they had heard so much, who was so dear to them, and in whom their minds were always absorbed. Now they saw him eye to eye and face to face, and Krishna entered within their hearts through their eyes. Within themselves, they began to embrace Krishna to their heart's content, and the distress of separation was mitigated immediately. They were just like great sages who, by their advancement of knowledge, merge into the existence of the Supreme. As the Supersoul living in everyone's heart, Lord Krishna could understand their minds. They had come to him despite all the protests of their relatives, fathers, husbands, and brothers, and despite all the duties of household affairs. They came just to see him, who was their life and soul. They were exactly following Krishna's instructions in the Bhagavad Gita. One should surrender to him, giving up all varieties of occupational and religious duties. He therefore began to speak to them, smiling very magnificently. It should be noted in this connection that when Krishna entered into the wives' hearts, and when they embraced him and felt the transcendental bliss of being merged with him, the Supreme Lord Krishna did not lose his identity, nor did the individual wives lose theirs. The individuality of both the Lord and the wives remained, yet they felt oneness in existence. When a lover submits to their lover without any pinch of personal consideration, that is called oneness. Lord Chaitanya has taught us this feeling of oneness in his Shikshashtaka. Krishna may act freely, doing whatever he likes, but the devotee should always be in oneness or in agreement with his desires. That oneness was exhibited by the wives of the Brahmins in their love for Krishna, just as it was exhibited by the gopis last chapter. This is oneness of purpose. Whether in the Madhurya rasa, as we see here in the gopis or in any other rasa, is this full surrender. It's a basic principle of pure devotional service. Whatever Krishna wants. Krishna welcomed them with the following words. My dear wives of the Brahmanas, you are all very fortunate and are welcome here. Please let me know what I can do for you. You're coming here to see me, neglecting all the restrictions and hindrances of relatives, fathers, brothers, and husbands. You're coming to see me here is completely befitting. One who does this actually knows their self-interest, because rendering transcendental loving service unto me without motive or restriction is actually auspicious for the living entities. Lord Krishna here confirms that the conditioned soul can reach the highest perfectional stage by surrendering to him. One must give up all other responsibilities. This complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most auspicious path for the conditioned soul, because the Supreme Lord is the supreme objective of love. Everyone is loving his self according to the advancement of their knowledge. Ultimately, when a person comes to understand that their self is the supreme spirit soul, and the spirit soul is nothing but a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, they recognize the Supreme Lord as the ultimate goal of love and then surrender unto him. This surrender is considered auspicious for the conditioned soul. Our life, property, home, wife, children, house, country, society, and all paraphernalia which are very dear to us are expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the central object of love because he gives us all bliss, expanding himself in so many ways according to our different situations, namely bodily, mental, or spiritual. My dear wives of the Brahmins, Krishna said, you can now return to your homes. Engage yourselves in sacrificial activities and in the service of your husbands and household affairs, so that your husbands will be pleased with you, and the sacrifice which they have begun will be properly executed. After all, your husbands are householders, and without your help, how can they execute their prescribed duties? The traditional duties of the Brahmin were to perform sacrifices, and most Brahmanas were married. We hear about Brahmin sannyasis, of course, also, but statistically, most Brahmins are grihastas. And actually, it's not possible to perform the duties of a Brahmin properly if you're not, some of those duties, the duties of a grihasta Brahmin, you can't perform without a wife. You have to be married because they have an important part to play. That's what Prabhupada is referring to here, that Krishna is saying, they need you, better go back. The wives of the Brahmanas replied, Dear Lord, this sort of instruction does not befit you. Your eternal promise is that you will always protect your devotees, and now you must fulfill this promise. Anyone who comes and surrenders unto you never goes back to the conditioned life of material existence. We expect that you will now fulfill your promise. We have surrendered unto your lotus feet, which are covered by tulsi leaves, so we have no desire to give up the shelter of your lotus feet and return to the company of our so-called relatives, friends, and society. And what shall we do if we return home? Our husbands, brothers, fathers, sons, mothers, and friends will no longer accept us at home because we have already left them all. Therefore, we have no shelter to return to. Please, therefore, do not ask us to return home, but arrange for our stay under your lotus feet, so that we can eternally live under your protection. The Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, My dear wives of the Brahmanas, rest assured that your husbands will not neglect you on your return, nor will your brothers, sons, or fathers refuse to accept you. Because you are my pure devotees, not only your relatives, but also people in general, as well as the demigods, will be satisfied with you. Krishna is situated as a supersoul in everyone's heart, so someone who becomes a pure devotee of Lord Krishna immediately becomes pleasing to everyone. The pure devotee of Lord Krishna is never inimical to anyone, nor can any sane person be an enemy of a pure devotee. Krishna continued, Transcendental love for me does not depend upon bodily connection, Krishna said further, but anyone whose mind is always absorbed in me will surely very soon come to me for my eternal association. After being instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the wives returned home to their respective husbands. Pleased to see their wives back home, the Brahmanas sat together with them and executed the performances of sacrifices as enjoined in the Shastras. According to Vedic principle, religious rituals must be executed by the husband and wife together. When the Brahmanas' wives returned, the sacrifice was duly and nicely executed. One of the Brahmanas' wives, however, who had been forcibly checked from going to see Krishna, began to remember him as she heard of his bodily features. Being completely absorbed in his thought, she gave up her material body, conditioned by the laws of nature. After the departure of the Brahmanas' wives, Sri Govinda and his cowherd boyfriends enjoyed the food they had offered. In this way, the ever-joyful personality of Godhead exhibited his transcendental pastimes in the guise of an ordinary human being, in order to attract the common people to Krishna consciousness. With his words and beauty, he attracted all the cows, cowherd boys, and damsels in Vrindavana. All of them together enjoyed the pastimes of the Lord. After the return of their wives from Krishna, the Brahmanas engaged in the performance of sacrifices began to regret their sinful activities and refusing food to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They could finally understand their mistake. Engaged in the performance of Vedic rituals, they had neglected the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who would appear just like an ordinary human being, and asked for some food. They began to condemn themselves after seeing the faith and devotion of their wives. They regretted very much that although their wives were elevated to the platform of pure devotional service, they themselves could not understand even a little bit of how to love and offer transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord. They began to talk among themselves, to hell with our being born Brahmanas, to hell with our learning all the Vedic literatures, to hell with our performing great sacrifices and observing all the rules and regulations, to hell with our family, to hell with our expert service and performing the rituals according to the description of the scriptures. To hell with it all, for we have not developed transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is beyond the speculation of the mind, body, and senses. Transcendental regret. They're angry at themselves. God damn it. The learned Brahmins, expert in Vedic ritualistic performances, were properly regretful, because if one does not develop Krishna consciousness, all discharge of religious duties is simply a waste of time and energy. Think about it. You know, if you go to church or mosque or synagogue or temple or whatever, and you like fast and feast and like dress a certain way and observe this funeral, wedding, birth, and you like follow all the moral, scriptural, logistical things, all the rules, even the rules that contradict the other rules. And you do all that and you never actually get any sense of service, of doing it for somebody, of connection, of love. What a waste, right? What a waste. That's what they're feeling right now. What have we been doing with ourselves? They continue to talk among themselves. The external energy of Krishna is so strong that it can create illusion to overcome even the greatest mystic yogi. Although we expert Brahmanas are considered to be the teachers of all other sections of human society, we also have been illusioned by the external energy. Just see how fortunate these women are. They have so devotedly dedicated their lives to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, that they easily did what is ordinarily so difficult. They gave up their family connections, which are just like a dark well for the continuation of material miseries. End quote. So now Prabhupada is speaking. Women in general, being very simple at heart, can very easily take to Krishna consciousness. And when they develop love of Krishna, they can easily get liberation from the clutches of Maya, which are very difficult for even so-called intelligent and learned men to surpass. So Prabhupada's talking about like kind of a classic difference between the feminine and masculine psychology. Masculine psychology can be quite analytical, and there has great value in that. And at the same time, it can be an impediment, as it was for these Brahmins. They got lost. They got lost in all the analysis, and the women didn't. And Prabhupada's indicating that the natural psychology was conducive for them to just be very simple in their devotion, and that was the highest thing that anybody could have in that situation, was just to be dedicated to Krishna. They didn't have anything get in the way. The Brahmins continued, according to Vedic injunction, women are not allowed to undergo the purificatory process of initiation by the sacred thread, nor are they allowed to live as brahmacharinis in the ashram of the spiritual master, nor are they advised to undergo the strict disciplinary procedures, nor are they very expert in discussing the philosophy of self-realization. And by nature, they're not very pure, nor are they very much attached to auspicious activities. Therefore, how wonderful it is that these women have developed transcendental love for Krishna, the Lord of all mystic yogis. They have surpassed all of us in firm faith and devotion unto Krishna. Although we are considered to be masters in all purificatory processes, we do not actually know what their goal is, because we are too much attached to the materialistic way of life. Even though we were reminded of Krishna and Balarama by the cowherd boys, we disregarded them. We now think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply played a trick of mercy on us by sending his friends to beg food from us. Otherwise, he had no need to send them. He could have satisfied their hunger then and there just by willing to do so. If someone denies the self-sufficiency of Krishna on hearing that he was tending the cows for his livelihood, or if someone doubts his not being in need of the food, thinking that he was actually hungry, then such a person should understand that the goddess of fortune is always engaged in his service. In this way, the goddess can break her faulty habit of restlessness. In Vedic literatures like the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that Krishna is served in his abode with great respect by not only one goddess of fortune, but many thousands. Therefore, it is simply illusion for one to think that Krishna begged food from the Brahmins. It was actually a trick to show them mercy by teaching them that they should accept him in pure devotional service instead of engaging in ritualistic ceremonies. The Vedic ceremonial paraphernalia, the Vedic hymns, the process of sacrifice, the priest who is able to perform the sacrifice, the fire, the demigods, the performer of the sacrifice, and the religious principles are all meant for understanding Krishna. For Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the Supreme Lord Vishnu and the Lord of all mystic yogis. Because he has appeared as a child in the dynasty of the Yadus, we were so foolish that we could not understand that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Brahman has said. But on the other hand, we are very proud because we have such exalted wives who have developed pure transcendental service of the Lord without being shackled by our rigid opposition. Let us therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, under whose illusory energy called Maya, we are absorbed in fruitive activities, right? Activities for material result. We therefore pray to the Lord to be kind enough to excuse us because we are simply captivated by his external energy. We transgressed his order without knowing his transcendental glories. The Brahmanas repented their sinful activities. They wanted to go personally to offer their obeisances unto him, but being afraid of Kamsa, they could not go to Krishna and surrender unto him. In other words, it is very difficult for one to surrender fully unto this personality of Godhead without being purified by devotional service. The example of the learned Brahmanas and their wives is vivid. The wives of the Brahmanas, because they were inspired by pure devotional service, did not care for any kind of opposition. They immediately went to Krishna. But the Brahmanas, although they had come to know the supremacy of the Lord and were repenting, were still afraid of King Kamsa because they were too much addicted to fruitive activities. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 23rd chapter of Krishna, delivering the wives of the Brahmanas who performed sacrifices. Hari Bol.
There is a demon listed
Okay.
with this, a different kind.
And can you pass that Krishna book?
Yeah, it says Brahmana performing sacrifice, so I think this is what that's referring to.
Yeah.
Indifference towards Krishna caused by pride because of one's status or position in Varnashram.
Yeah, social position. And the pride that can come thereof as an obstacle. So this pastime purifies us of that pride. Not an impediment to have a high social position. It's an impediment to be bewildered by that. So, I'm fishing for pictures. Let's get some comments, questions, and reflections while I look. What stood out from that chapter? What did you hear?
Haribol.
Adivo.
I feel like sincerity is like the magic key. That's essentially, sorry. I don't know if you can hear the conch. That was loud. Sorry.
Good.
I feel like sincerity is like the magic key. It's like it's the piece that makes it all work, right? And so like even if they're just highly engaged in ritualistic activities or behaviors and not necessarily able to access this essence. And even in our own practices, like sometimes I feel like, sadhana can become repetitive by nature at times. And just this morning, this is my week off of work. And so just this morning, I like sat at my harmonium and I don't even know how long I was chanting for, probably like 45 minutes. I totally lost track of time and just like opened my heart and sincerity after I had read something that like inspired me to do that. And what a difference it makes. Like what a difference it makes to really actually just call out, to actually be there in a complete mood of devotional service, not worrying about the time, not worrying about how many rounds can I get in or what do I need to do before I get out of the house. And it makes such a difference. And it's just a really amazing reminder.
Yeah, all that practice is training for us to actually choose to serve him. And then there's an irreplaceable quality of what it's like to actually do that, to be just in your japa, in your kirtan, and just like in your service, like to actually give yourself and not have to, not let yourself, worry about, oh, what about me? What about the time? Or just get lost in that. There's something really ineffable in that. Thank you. I did find a picture. I found Krishna um, sitting in a tree, and he's calling the girls to him. Any more reflections on this chapter? Wives of the Brahmins. I always thought it was very stark contrast.
Stark contrast.
It's a stark contrast between the wives and the Brahmins themselves. Yeah. It really just throws the whole social thing on its head.
Mhm.
Similar to what we saw with actually the Nagapatnis, the wives of Kalia, the serpent demon. Kalia is their husband, and he is in the superior position in the traditional social order, and he's about to be killed, and he was only saved because his wives prayed for him because they're devotees.
Mhm.
And then he realized toward the end that the beatdown that Krishna put on him, that he was actually being purified by that. He could realize who he was dealing with, and he began to repent. But the acharyas explained that there was reciprocation there from Krishna for the fact that these devotee wives were praying. So it's notable that it's twice in a row in quick succession that it's the women saving the men, because that's very much in contradiction to the traditional social order, and in at least of that time,
Mhm.
traditional social order, natural psychology, like the strict varnashrama, because it isn't dependent. Bhakti isn't dependent on those things at all. So the contrast is very powerful.
Mhm.
Um, Not that men can't make spiritual advancement as well as any women, but it's just that contrast is so. I just thought it was so amazing how revolutionary bhakti is here. Like they're condemning everything they've done with their lives, like to hell with it all. They actually, like, their minds were blown by how completely they fell on their face. They missed the point completely. And their wives, who they probably had been taking for granted, it's like, these people are here to serve me. Like, they just took them for granted. These wives actually invoked the presence of the supreme personality of Godhead in their lives by their simple devotion. It's like, what? It's great.
Mhm.
One of my favorite pastimes. Stacy.
It just, as you were talking, I thought about this. So by birth, I'm Jewish, and we didn't really practice it, but my father was a diamond dealer. So he had a store front in the diamond district. And so when I would go there, there was a lot of Hasidim, the Hasidim, but the ones,
Conservative Jews. Yeah.
right? So um they wouldn't look at me, they wouldn't, because I was not Hasidim. I was wearing pants, I was not
They're
dressed.
highly Orthodox Jews. Yeah. You can find this
Yeah,
in every tradition. That's in that tradition. Those are the very Orthodox, like Smarta Brahmins. Those are Smarta Jews.
right.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I'm just you're saying it much quicker and easier than I am. So basically, like what's happening is they do the same thing though. They think that it's like, if I'm just was I don't know, it just popped into my head as you were talking that the women, they stay home, they have to do this, they have to follow all of these rules. And then the Hasidim, all they do is their whole life really is, other than working, is they get up, they're in the temple, they're rolling the thing. I forgot what it's even called. I'm not religious, but all the things that they're doing, and they're dedicating, like these Brahmin, their whole life to,
Yeah.
especially if they're the Hasidim, very religious, and and then and then what are they getting? And they do believe like the women are there to serve them, just like these Brahmin probably thought. And at the end of the day, you know, they're studying spiritual, like they're missing the boat, because they're like, here, what I love about Krishna consciousness, for me at least, is that yes, there's all the sacred literature, which for me is a little bit tougher to get through, but like this all day long. So for me, all day long, I'm still making my, and Eileen, I think said it, sincerity, my sincere advancements through this, until I can, as I'm learning the scriptures and those things, and I study them. But what I love is that the Leelas and the Rasas really, for me, just really bring me so close,
Yeah.
close, when in like other religions, I'm sure other ones other than Judaism, also it's like you have to know the scriptures, and it's, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hasidic Judaism is a really good example of very orthodox, ritualistic, where the consideration is primarily purity and avoiding impurity. It's actually a very refined conception because persons who like in any kind of tradition like that recognize that the material world and material life is basically a problem. They're generally in a mode of goodness if they're following their traditions. However, attachment to that thing, those practices in and of themselves, if it misses the point of the supreme person, which I can't say if any given conservative or Orthodox Jew or Muslim or anybody else actually misses the point, but it's definitely a phenomenon that one can get lost in the details. So the basic idea in Kali Yuga is that we are so degraded, we're so distracted, and we're so unfortunate that Krishna's like making a concession for all of us. Don't worry so much about the purity. Just try to practice devotion directly to me. I'm going to make it really easy. Here are my names. Here is immediately accessible process. Actually, if we consider what we're doing, like you talked about scripture, right? What we're doing when we're studying Shastra, the Bhagavatam, it's very advanced, actually. We're actually like, it's staggering if we start to realize how advanced this scripture really is, this Srimad Bhagavatam, that here is the Supreme Person, and he's having a very intimate connection with his own pleasure potency, his internal Shakti, his feminine aspect. And here we are, like a few minutes removed from being completely in Maya, just like brought into the Sangha, allowed to hear this. That's Lord Chaitanya's mercy. That's Kali Yuga, that we're so out to lunch. He's like, everyone get in here. You're all invited, You all get prasad, you all get the holy name, you all get Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's just a thing of if you can stay humble, no matter how much learning we do undertake, if we can stay humble, if we can stay sincere, there's no impediment to becoming completely perfect in bhakti, because it's really just a very simple process. And it's all just by grace because of Mahaprabhu.
Yeah, and just one more thing I want to add is, yeah, you're right. I'm not even giving myself that credit though, like, because you're right, it's very, what did you call it? It's very,
It's refined. It's certainly more refined than
fine.
material life,
It's
where it's like,
refined.
oh,
What
you're 21 years old. Why don't you drink yourself into a stupor? Those are our traditions here. And
Yeah, but you know what they do, that the Hasidim, what they do is they remove themselves. So they're almost in like Guyana, because in New York
yeah,
where I live, like they
yeah,
remove themselves and live in one area, and they don't really associate
yeah,
anybody that's not Hasidim. Like they won't look at me, they won't talk to me, even though I said hello to them, they won't answer me.
yeah.
So it's such a what? Like I don't like it's such a craziness. Like it blows my mind.
Because they're afraid of the material energy, which is good. You should be afraid of the material energy. And ultimately, our philosophy is that we're leaning on Krishna, and that's
Yeah,
why we get to be so inclusive.
that's in the mode of religion.
Let's go to Eileen. She has her hand up, and then I want to see if I can sneak another chapter in.
I think Tracy had her hand up too.
Oh, Tracy too. So Eileen, then Tracy.
So really quick, vibing off of what Tanya said earlier, where it was like, this chapter before that we just read, like a couple chapters before, right? We're talking about the gopis and having this kind of like, you could look at it as degradation, or you could look at, but it's not, right? And so we kind of look at it, that's go, and then we jump to this extremely feminist chapter. So I thought it was kind of cool to see this juxtaposed, to say like, here's the gopis surrendering, being extremely vulnerable, not necessarily like, kind of stripped down to like just they're not, to just their naturalness. And then moving on to talk about women and how, you know, sometimes it can get skewed, I think, in text, like women are less intelligent. What does that actually mean and all that? And this is such a beautiful example about how, like, you know, how this is a very feminist movement, and how like putting those together, I think, is a really cool kind of parallel when you're reading through it.
Yeah, there's no impediment to whatever particular combination of material energy you bring. You know, if you have an analytical mind or if you have a simple heart, those can both be used in Krishna's service. And ultimately, whether it was the gopis reciprocating, Krishna reciprocating with them in that way, or him reciprocating with the wives of the Brahmins, both of them are manifestations of his mercy. They're both actually our acharyas explain the gopis got even more mercy because their perfection was more developed. The purports to this chapter we just read will elucidate that, if I'm not mistaken, why it is that, because they don't actually leave their husbands and go to Krishna. He says, no, you can practice with them and you'll remember me. But the gopis do actually, like, they dance with him and everything. So there's a little bit of a difference. The gopis actually got even more mercy than the wives did. But yeah, amazing. And Tracy, did you have your hand up too?
Yeah, it's just, think of it as a summary, or you know, pulling it all together. Is there's a line in here that really just kind of like really resonated with me. It's on page 186. When a lover submits to his lover without any pinch of personal consideration, that is called oneness. And I feel like the reminder of all of us being and doing the goal, right, is to remember who we truly are and to remember us as spirit souls, no matter whether we're male or female or whatever, right? That we're all here and parts and parcels of Krishna. So our goal is to be sincere in all of our practice, to remember we're all here for the same thing.
Yeah. Bye.
We have time for another
We have time for another chapter. I think we do. Well,
You pick and choose.
let's try. Worshipping Govardhan Hill. While engaged with the Brahmins who were too much involved in the performance of Vedic sacrifices, Krishna and Balaram also saw that the cowherd men were preparing a similar sacrifice to pacify Indra, the king of heaven, who was responsible for supplying water. As stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, a devotee of Krishna has strong and firm faith that if they simply engage in Krishna consciousness and Krishna's transcendental loving service, they're freed from all other obligations. A pure devotee of Krishna doesn't have to perform any of the ritualistic functions in the Vedas, nor are they required to worship any demigods. Being a devotee of Lord Krishna, one is understood to have performed all kinds of Vedic rituals and all kinds of worship to the demigods. One does not develop devotional service for Krishna by performing the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies or worshipping demigods, but it should be understood that one who is engaged fully in the service of Krishna, the Lord, has already fulfilled all Vedic injunctions. In order to stop all such activities by his devotees, Krishna wanted to firmly establish exclusive devotional service during his presence in Vrindavan. He knew that the cowherd men were preparing for the Indra sacrifice, but as a matter of etiquette, he began to inquire with great honor and submission from elder personalities like Nanda Maharaj. Krishna asked his father, "What is this arrangement going on for a great sacrifice? What is the result of such a sacrifice? For whom is it meant? How is it performed? Will you let me know? I am very eager to know this procedure, so please explain to me the purpose of this sacrifice." Nanda Maharaj remained silent, thinking that his young boy would not be able to understand the intricacies of performing the yajna. Krishna persisted. "My dear father, for those who are liberal and saintly, there is no secrecy. They do not think anyone to be a friend, an enemy, or a neutral party because they're always open to everyone. And even for those who are not so liberal, nothing should be kept secret from family members and friends, although secrecy may be maintained for persons who are inimical. Therefore, you cannot keep any secrets from me. All persons are engaged in fruitive activities. Some know what these activities are, and they know the results, and some execute the activities without knowing the purpose or the result. A person who acts with full knowledge gets the full result. One who acts without knowledge does not get such a perfect result. Therefore, please let me know the purpose of the sacrifice you're going to perform. Is it Vedic injunction? Is it a popular ceremony? Kindly let me know in detail about the sacrifice." On hearing this inquiry from Krishna, Nanda Maharaj replied, "My dear boy, this ceremonial performance is more or less traditional. Because rainfall is due to the mercy of King Indra and the clouds are his representatives, and water is so important for our living, we must show some gratitude to the controller of this rainfall, Maharaj Indra. We are arranging therefore to pacify King Indra because he has very kindly sent us clouds to pour down a sufficient quantity of rain for successful agriculture. Water is very important. Without rainfall, we cannot farm or produce grains, and without grain, we cannot live. So we should not give up this traditional ceremonial function. If one gives it up, being influenced by lust, greed, or fear, it does not look good for him. After hearing this, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in the presence of his father and all the elder cowherd men of Vrindavan, spoke in such a way to make the heavenly king Indra very angry. He suggested they forego the sacrifice. His reasons for discouraging the sacrifice performed to please Indra were twofold. First, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, there is no need to worship the demigods for any material advancement. All results derived from worshiping demigods are simply temporary, and only those who are less intelligent are interested in temporary results. Second, whatever temporary result one derives from worshiping the demigods is actually granted by the permission of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mayaiva vihitan hitan. Without the permission of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot bestow any benefit upon others. But sometimes the demigods become puffed up by the influence of material nature, thinking themselves all in all. They forget the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is clearly stated that in this instance, Krishna wanted to make King Indra angry. His advent was especially meant for the annihilation of the demons and protection of the devotees. King Indra was certainly a devotee, not a demon. But because he was puffed up, Krishna wanted to teach him a lesson. He first made Indra angry by stopping the Indra Puja, which had been arranged. With this purpose in mind, Krishna began to talk as if he were an atheist supporting the philosophy of karma mimamsa. Advocates of this philosophy do not accept the supreme authority of the personality of Godhead. They put forward the argument that if anyone works very nicely, the result is sure to come. Their opinion is that even if there is a God who gives man the result of his fruitive activities, there is no need to worship him, because unless man works, he cannot bestow any good result. They said that instead of worshiping a demigod or God, people should give attention to their own duties, and thus the good result will surely come. My dear father, he said, I don't think you need to worship any demigod for the successful performance of your agricultural activities. Every living being is born according to their past karma and leaves this life simply taking the result of his present karma. Different grades of material happiness and distress, comforts and disadvantages of life are different results of different kinds of activities, from either the past or present life. Nanda Maharaj and other elder members argued that without satisfying the predominating God, one cannot derive any good result simply by material activities. This is actually the fact. For example, it is sometimes found that in spite of first-class medical help and treatment by a first-class physician, the diseased person dies. It is concluded, therefore, that first-class medical treatment or the attempts of a first-class physician are not in themselves the cause for curing a patient. There must be the hand of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, a father and mother's taking care of their children is not the cause of the children's comfort. Sometimes it is found that in spite of all care by the parents, the children go bad or succumb to death. Therefore, material causes are not sufficient for results. There must be the sanction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nanda Maharaj therefore advocated that in order to get good results, they must satisfy Indra, the superintending deity of the rain supply. Lord Krishna nullified this argument, saying that the demigods give results only to persons who have executed their prescribed duties. The demigods cannot give any good results to persons who have not executed the prescribed duties. Therefore, demigods are dependent on the execution of duties and are not absolute in awarding good results to anyone. So why should one care about them? My dear father, Lord Krishna said, there is no need to worship the demigod Indra. Everyone has to achieve the result of their own work. We can actually see that one becomes busy according to the natural tendency of their work. And according to that natural tendency, all living entities achieve their respective results. All living entities achieve higher or lower bodies and create friends, enemies, or neutral parties only because of their different kinds of work. One should be careful to discharge duties according to their natural instinct and not divert attention to the worship of various demigods. The demigods will be satisfied by proper execution of all duties, so there is no need to worship them. Let us rather perform our prescribed duties very nicely. This is still Krishna talking. Actually, one cannot be happy without executing their prescribed duty. One who does not therefore properly discharge their prescribed duty is compared to an unchaste wife. The proper prescribed duty of the Brahmana is the study of the Vedas. Of the royal order is engagement in protecting the citizens. The duty of the Vaishya community is agriculture, trade, and protection of the cows. and the duty of the Shudras is service to the higher classes. We belong to the Vaishya community, and our proper duty is to farm, trade agricultural produce, and protect cows or to take to banking. Krishna identified himself with the Vaishya community because Nanda Maharaj was protecting many cows, and Krishna was taking care of them. He enumerated 4 kinds of business engagements for the Vaishya, namely agriculture, trade, protection of cows, and banking. Although the Vaishyas can take to any of these occupations, the men of Vrindavan were engaged primarily in the protection of cows. Krishna further explained, this cosmic manifestation is going on under the influence of the 3 modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. These 3 modes are the causes of creation, maintenance, and destruction. The cloud is caused by the action of the mode of passion. Therefore, it is the mode of passion which causes the rainfall. And after the rainfall, the living entities derive the result: success in agricultural work. What then has Indra to do with the affair? Even if you do not please Indra, what can you do? We do not derive any special benefit from Indra. Even if he is there, he pours water on the ocean also, where there is no need of water. So he's pouring water on the ocean or on the land. It does not depend on our worshipping him. As far as we are concerned, we do not need to go to another city or village or foreign country. There are palatial buildings in the cities, but we are satisfied living in this forest of Vrindavan. Our specific relationship is with Govardhan Hill and Vrindavan forest and nothing more. I therefore request you, my dear father, to begin a sacrifice which will satisfy the local Brahmins and Govardhan Hill, and let us have nothing to do with Indra. After hearing this statement by Krishna, Nanda Maharaj replied, my dear boy, since you are asking, I shall arrange for a separate sacrifice for the local Brahmins and Govardhan Hill. But for the present, let me execute this sacrifice known as Indra Yagya. But Krishna replied, my dear father, don't delay. The sacrifice you propose, the sacrifice you propose for Govardhan and the local Brahmins will take much time. Better take the arrangement and paraphernalia you have already made for the Indra Yagya and immediately engage them to satisfy Govardhan Hill and the local Brahmins. Maharaj Nanda finally relented. The cowherd men then inquired from Krishna how he wanted the yagya performed, and Krishna gave the following directions. Prepare very nice foods of all descriptions from the grain and ghee collected for the yagya. Prepare rice, dal, then halva, pakora, puri, and all kinds of milk preparations such as sweet rice, rubbery, sweet balls, sandesha, rasgulla, laddu, and invite the learned Brahmins who can chant the Vedic hymns and offer oblations to the fire. One note, he also says you should offer supa. And the word for word is, this is a liquid preparation broth. And I was like, oh my God, that's soup. The word soup comes from Sanskrit. Supa. The Brahmins should be given all kinds of grain in charity. Then decorate all the cows and feed them well. After performing this, give money in charity to the Brahmins. As far as lower animals are concerned, such as dogs, and the lower grades of people such as the Chandalas or the 5th class of men who are considered untouchable, they also may be given sumptuous prasadam. After nice grasses are given to the cows, the sacrifice known as Govardhan Puja may immediately begin. This sacrifice will very much satisfy me. In this statement, Lord Krishna practically described the whole economy of the Vaishya community. In all communities in human society, and in the animal kingdom, everyone has their part to play. Each is to work in cooperation for the total benefit of all society, which includes not only animate objects, but also inanimate objects like hills and land. The Vaishya community is specifically responsible for the economic improvement of the society by producing grain, by giving protection to the cows, by transporting food when needed, and by banking and finance. From this statement, we learn also that, although the cats and dogs, which have now become so important, are not to be neglected, cow protection is actually more important than protection of cats and dogs. Another hint we get from this statement is that the Chandalas, or the untouchables, are also not to be neglected by the higher classes and should be given necessary protection. Everyone is important, but some are directly responsible for the advancement of human society and some are only indirectly responsible. However, when Krishna consciousness is there, then everyone's total benefit is taken care of. The sacrifice known as Govardhan Puja is observed in the Krishna consciousness movement. Lord Chaitanya has recommended that since Krishna is worshipable, his land, Vrindavan and Govardhan Hill, is also worshipable. To confirm this statement, Lord Krishna said that Govardhan Puja is as good as worship of him. From that day, Govardhan Puja has been going on and is known as Annakuta. In all the temples of Vrindavan or outside of Vrindavan, Huge quantities of food are prepared in this ceremony and are very sumptuously distributed to the general population. Sometimes the food is thrown to the crowds, and they enjoy collecting it off the ground. From this, we can understand that prasadam offered to Krishna never becomes polluted or contaminated, even if it is thrown on the ground. People therefore collect and eat it with great satisfaction. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, thus advised the coward men to stop the Indra Yagya and begin the Govardhan Puja in order to chastise Indra, who was very much puffed up at being the supreme controller of the heavenly planets. The honest and simple cowherd men, headed by Nanda Maharaj, accepted Krishna's proposal and executed in detail everything he advised. They performed Govardhan worship and circumambulation of the hill. Following the inauguration of Govardhan Puja, people in Vrindavan still dress nicely and assemble near Govardhan Hill to offer worship and circumambulate the hill, leading their cows all around. According to the instruction of Lord Krishna, Nanda Maharaj and the cowherd men called in learned Brahmins and began to worship Govardhan Hill by chanting Vedic hymns and offering prasadam. The inhabitants of Vrindavan assembled together, decorated their cows, and gave them grass. Keeping the cows in front, they began to circumambulate Govardhan Hill. The gopis dressed themselves very luxuriantly and sat in bull-driven carts, chanting the glories of Krishna's pastimes. The Brahmanas assembled there to act as priests for Govardhan Puja offered their blessings to the cowherd men and the gopis. When everything was complete, Krishna assumed a great transcendental form and declared to the inhabitants of Vrindavan that he was himself Govardhan Hill, in order to convince the devotees that Govardhan Hill and Krishna himself are identical. Then Krishna began to eat all the food offered there. He takes the form of the hill, and he eats it in that form. He eats the food. The identity of Krishna and Govardhan is still honored, and great devotees take rocks from Govardhan Hill and worship them exactly as they worship the deity of Krishna in the temples. The followers of the Krishna consciousness movement may therefore collect small rocks or pebbles from Govardhan Hill and worship them at home, because this worship is as good as deity worship. To elaborate, those are called Govardhan Shilas. If you are a second initiated devotee and you have the blessings of your guru, you can collect Govardhan Shila and worship. It's a very serious thing to do. It's not just like a whimsical thing, but Prabhupada is indicating that under the right circumstances, the rocks that comprise Govardhan Hill are considered to be, because they're considered non-different from Krishna, they're already established deities. You can worship them as such. Giriraj, king of hills. The form of Krishna who began to eat the offerings was separately constituted, and Krishna himself, along with the other inhabitants of Vrindavan, offered obeisances to the deity, as well as Govardhan Hill. In offering obeisances to the huge form of Krishna and Govardhan Hill, Krishna declared, "Just see how Govardhan Hill has assumed this huge form, and is favoring us by accepting all the offerings." Krishna also declared at that meeting, "One who neglects the worship of Govardhan Puja, as I'm personally conducting it, will not be happy. There are many snakes on Govardhan Hill, and persons neglecting the prescribed duty of Govardhan Puja will be bitten by these snakes and killed. In order to assure the good fortune of the cows and themselves, all people of Vrindavan near Govardhan must worship the hill as prescribed by me." Thus performing the Govardhan Puja sacrifice, all the inhabitants of Vrindavan followed the instructions of Krishna, son of Vasudeva, and afterwards they returned to their respective homes. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 24th chapter of Krishna, worshipping Govardhan Hill. Haribol. Yeah, just as a note, all this philosophy and all this like fear-mongering of like the snakes will bite you, all of it's just trick. Krishna just wants them to worship him, and he wants to make it clear not to bother with the demigods, and he wants to purify Indra, who was stuck in his pride. He was just tricking everybody. And Nanda Maharaj was just so in love with his son that he's like, okay, whatever you want. That'll come in the next chapter. We won't take comments, questions, reflections on this chapter right now. Okay, we will. 30 seconds, really quick. And then you can reflect in the WhatsApp chat anything you heard from these two chapters. Anyone got anything? Going once? Going twice?
I mean, simplest thing is that Nanda Maharaj listened. He listened to Krishna. And so much of the time we get caught up in like what we should, like the shoulds. And sometimes that inhibits us from like fully listening. And I think that that is just like a really beautiful testament to this funny, amazing, wonderful story and Leela, and that, you know, Nanda Maharaj, he listened and he followed what Krishna was asking of him, and that was huge.
Yeah, we can see that with Super Soul. Sometimes he whispers to us, and often, I don't know about you guys, but I'm like, I don't recognize Super Soul right away. I'm like, that's an interesting idea, but I think I got a better plan. And I only remember that happening because afterwards, I remember all the times, and I'm like, oh my God, that was Krishna. I did it again. I outsmarted him. I outsmarted myself. I didn't listen to him because Nanda doesn't do that. He's like, all right, yeah, okay. So there's a certain kind of art in that, hearing that voice of Krishna and like tuning in and just surrendering to it. We will pause there. And I would love for all of you to just reflect anything from these two chapters, 23, 24 in the WhatsApp. They were really beautiful. Wives of the Brahmins and Govardhan Hill. The first of the Govardhan Hill chapters, there's more Govardhan Leela to come. So stay tuned for that. That's awesome.
We're gonna have classes up until.
Yeah, we're gonna have a class next week and a class the week after, which are classes 12 and 13 of this container. And then Kishori and I are gonna have a little old ceremony
Oh, yeah.
where we have a little yagya for Krishna, and it's a Vivaha yagya. We're gonna have a wedding ceremony, and then we're gonna be away for a little bit, and we'll start a new container afterwards,
27.
on the 27th of May. And I'm open to continuing Krishna book. I'm open to like another book. I'm open to starting the Bhagavad Gita again. We can talk about it.
Take a poll.
We'll take a poll. I'm just here to serve all of you, but we definitely have 2 more chapters of Krishna book in this container before we pause. So, Haribol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Krishna reciprocating with the wives of the Brahmins ki jai. Govardhan Hill ki jai. Vancha kalpatarubyascha kripasindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. See you all on WhatsApp. See you all on YouTube. See you all on the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna. Yes, we'll put the dates in the group. Thank you, Stacy. Haribol.